Whether you are just starting your music production journey or you've been doing this for 10 plus years, I am sure you have made at least half of these mistakes. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because there are a few of these mistakes that I'm sure you are making. You don't even know it yet. Number one is relying too heavily on a single sound. Once you start getting into the groove of things and really finding your sound, you start to kind of just follow the path that you've always done. And this is not necessarily a bad thing all the time. You get great sounding music pretty quickly because this is just what you do. You load up this plugin and you load up this preset and you load up this template. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when you start making a lot of music and you start making music, especially for other artists as well, you don't necessarily want a lot of overlap in that area. You want to make sure that things are fresh and you always feel inspired when you are making music. A good rule of thumb that I have is if I am not feeling very inspired and I kind of feel bored during the process, that is a time to start finding new sounds, new techniques, and start going out of the box. What I used to do is just scour the internet and find a bunch of free samples and contact libraries, or even pay for a couple contact libraries and sample packs. But what I started doing recently is getting a microphone and recording my own Foley and different sorts of sounds and using that and seeing what I can get just banging stuff around my room, or if I'm out on a road trip and I hear something neat, I want to be able to record that and start to use that in my music production. That has helped a ton to keep me still feeling inspired while doing the same old I've done for the last 10 years. Number two is not leaving enough headroom in your mix. It can be tempting to kind of push things down to the master bus a lot harder than they actually need to be. But what I like to do is I like to throw a limiter on my master bus and then mix into my limiter and make sure that I'm checking to make sure that I'm not pushing too much volume into that limiter. Leaving headroom is a big deal. It's what's called gain staging and making sure that everything is set properly along your tracks. Now, this kind of sounds like advice for beginners, but experienced producers still make this mistake because they miss a very important thing, and that is gain staging in between your plugins. If you are loading up plugins and you have -18 to -9 on your way in, if you're not careful, you will start to increase the volume with every single plugin you add. And next thing you know, you're sending way too much audio to the next plugin. And then that plugin starts to distort or starts to clip inside of that plugin. Yes, it might not seem to be clipping on the way in or on the way to your master bus because you've turned down the fader of this specific channel, but it could still be clipping in between plugins. You really want to pay attention to gain staging and leaving headroom, not just in between tracks and onto your master bus, but also in between your plugins. Number three, neglecting to back up your projects. There are two types of people in the world: people that back up their projects and people that will. And if you haven't been in the painful spot of losing all of your data or information, especially on a project that you are working on a client with, count your blessings and go start backing up your hard drives immediately. You can pick up external hard drives on Amazon for a dime a dozen these days, and honestly, anything to just back things up. This matters even more when you start getting paid for the work that you are doing and working with other artists. If an artist messages you 3-4 years later, and I have been in this situation, and they're asking for the stems or the original mix so that way they can send it out for remastering, you might be in trouble if you don't have backups. So make sure you have your files backed up. Make sure you're rendering out your plugins inside of your sessions as well, just in case you don't have that plugin subscription in the future, or the plugin manufacturer goes out of business. I mean, all of these things happen. So render out your sessions, save them to a external hard drive, and just keep a box of them. Trust me on this, you will thank me in the future. Number four is overusing effects. Effects can be really helpful and really useful, and you kind of get into a groove of how the effects sound in your favorite effects, but sometimes you can overuse it and go a little too far. I know I am guilty still to this day of overusing reverb. I'm like, man, this sounds good in solo, and then you get it into the mix and then the vocal disappears. It's because it's sounding like it's just off into the distance because of that space that reverb created. Adding creative effects and glitches and really cool stuff like that can also be a lot of fun, but overdoing it will just distract the listener and take away from the actual performance of the song. Now, to keep a little check in place to make sure that you don't overdo this is before loading up another plugin, just ask yourself why. You can always go back later and add that plugin again if you want to. Now, this is not necessarily a binary this way or this way. You still have to leave yourself room to get creative and experiment inside of your DAW. This is not a only do this or only do this. This is a dichotomy that you want to be able to manage. Sit down and actually make time to experiment and play around your DAW, and make sure you set time aside to mix music and produce music. And between those two times that you set aside, you will be able to experiment and bring your favorite experiments over to the sessions that you will be releasing to Spotify, iTunes, and the radio. You know, another mistake that people make all the time is not downloading any of my free resources. I have a ton of free stuff, like the Ultimate Guide to Recording Vocals at Home. I have free Slate digital presets. I have free Studio One presets. I have a guide on compression. I'll leave the links to all of those down in the description below. Check them out and download them for free. It's my gift to you for watching this video. And there's a lot more free stuff that's going to be coming in the future, and that's all I'm going to say about that right now. And mistake number 5 is not taking a break to rest your ears. There is a thing called ear fatigue, and I think the proper term is temporary threshold shift, which is basically a fancy term for your ears just getting tired and not hearing things the way they used to. But if you are making mixing decisions like compression and EQ, take at least a 15-minute break every hour to hour and a half. I know that sounds like a lot, but your ears will start to fatigue, especially around the 1 to 2K area. You won't notice that at all. And then all of a sudden you'll come back after about a 15-minute break, your ears will start to get readjusted, and then all of a sudden all of these frequencies are going to start poking out back at you because your ears got fatigued and they started to automatically turn it down inside your head. If you are making mixing decisions, take a 15-minute break every hour to hour and a half if you can. Mistake number 6 is not giving your tracks enough space to breathe. How I define this is every single track should add something to the song. There's a lot of that ear candy that you like to lay in there as well, but if a track just doesn't make a difference whether it's in there or not, just take it out. There should be a pure and clear intention for every single track that you are adding onto your session. I have mixed 20 track sessions and I have mixed 180 track sessions. And I promise you, you can get a 20 track session to sound just as good as 180 if you're just way more intentional about what you are adding to your tracks. But the point I'm trying to make is, do you really need the 7 different room mics, or can you actually get away with just 2 or 3? Be intentional about every single track you are adding into your DAW, and you will save yourself a bunch of time and you will serve the song better. Now, mistake number 7, and this is one that I still continually make to this day, is not paying attention to the arrangement. If you are copying and pasting verses and choruses and then calling it a day, you might be making the same mistake that I still make almost every single day. It can be nice to get into the habit of being able to copy and paste sessions over, but to serve the song well, you need to actually pay attention to arrangement. Maybe take a couple tracks out, maybe take a couple instruments out during the verse, or maybe add a couple more in the second verse than you did in the first verse. Understand how your chords could shift in between the first verse and the second verse, or in between your choruses. Really pay attention to the arrangement, because the arrangement is songwriting, and that is the most important part of this whole process. Really think about how your elements will evolve over the course of the song and how they will work together. Mistake number 8 is not setting clear goals before starting a project. Before you ever press record, you should have a really good idea of where you want to take your song. For me personally, I like to have reference tracks, and I like to have a song basically completely done before I bring anything into the DAW. That's just me personally, but the concept remains the same for everybody else watching this. You should have a goal in mind, or else you're just going to be aimlessly flipping around different sample packs and going around different contact libraries. Maybe this is an EDM track, and maybe this is an R&B track. Really pay attention to where you're going before you ever press record. It is going to help you write better music. Like I said before, this is more or less a dichotomy that you want to manage. You should definitely have time to experiment and to have fun. But if every time you open a session, you have no idea where it's going to go, you're probably not releasing nearly as much music as you could, and you could serve your songs way better with a well-determined path. Over the past 10 years, I have mixed hundreds of songs, and there are 5 things that always seem to be true every time I mix a song. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, you can click on this video right here. In that video, I break down the 5 things that always seem to be true every time I mix a song, no matter the genre, the instrument, or anything else. So click here, I'll see you over there. And as always, go create.